All right, everybody, we are here. Welcome to the Gestalt Media book chat / cocktail hour. And I'm going to host today. Jason Stokes usually is your host, but since he is our guest today, as we're going to talk about his book, Watcher, I'm going to go ahead and kick us off here this evening. So welcome, everybody, and I want to let you see who we've got here. Some of you may know already because we're all familiar, I believe. Of course, we've got Jason, but also Anna Ray Stokes. She is going to be a special interest to us as a guest tonight. I'm not going to say too much else about that, Anna. Is there anything else you would that we should let people know about you other than you are a member of the Gestalt Media family and very integral because you handle a lot of important stuff? What do you do for Gestalt Media? But what do you not do? That because Anna,
I don't write.
That's the one thing, right? But
she does a lot for us, actually. She's having a little bit of computer trouble at the moment, so we're hoping that's gonna level out. But she does a lot of editing work for us. She does a lot of reads our slush pile, and she handles the finances because, Lord help us, I don't think we'd make it very far if I did it myself. So she's very important to all of our futures.
Yeah, she's wearing a lot of hats. We'll definitely put it that way.
Several.
And Elaine Davis is joining us too. And Elaine, you've been a very loyal Gestalt Media fan. And I know you're doing some writing, and I don't know what other projects you've got right now other than you've got a family that keeps you full-time busy. What all else is going on in your life right now?
Well, I work full-time, but aside from that, I cook and I clean and take care of the hubby and the family, and then I am working on my first novel, which is going to be a supernatural romance, which if anybody has read my short story that won the January prize, it takes place in that same universe. So I don't want to give away too much, but.
Well, that's cool. That's great. And I think so. In all your free time, you are able to do that writing.
Not super well.
No, there's a lot of free time, I can imagine. Anyway, well, like I said, I'm going to host today. I'm David Allen Voyles, the author of the 13th Day of Christmas and other Yuletide horror. I like horror, and that's my thing. And that'll be kind of a good place to kick off here with a question for Jason. About Watcher. Watcher is an action thriller, is what I would say. I don't know if there's another genre name, but that seems like what it is to me, because it really is a roller coaster ride of a thriller. And yet, a lot of what Gestalt Media is known for is definitely dark stuff, often supernatural. And yet, this book has absolutely nothing supernatural about it. Was that by choice? Is that by design? Is that very typical? What prompted you to write a book that didn't have anything supernatural in it?
Well, that's a good question. It actually was my first novel, so it doesn't follow the same. It doesn't follow the same. Hold on.
Got a little audio there.
Okay. It doesn't follow the same rules that we're used to, that we have done with our other books. It isn't the same genre, but I feel like the name of the company tells you everything you need to know there. We are Gestalt Media, and Gestalt means loosely everything. It's the theory of all things coming together as a new whole. And so I don't shy away from any genres. In fact, I have probably 8 novels that are being written at the moment and that are in progress, and they span from sci-fi to pulp to everything but fantasy. I don't write fantasy. It's just a personal choice. It's just not, I don't feel like I'm good at it, and I haven't found that story yet, but I'll write in any genre. And I feel like Watcher, I don't know, I don't even know where to put it. Is it a mystery? Is it a thriller? I don't know. It is kind of dark to me, but Yeah, I don't feel like the paranormal would have fit in that storyline, so it just didn't make it that time, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Well, it really didn't need to. I mean, it rides on its own merits by that. And I was just curious if that was, you've already answered the question, really, but how much of a variety of genres you're interested in, because you write in many of them. Most people just have a lot of books at the same time that they're reading, but they don't have that many that they're actually writing at the same time. So that's pretty amazing. So
It's how many you finished that counts.
Yeah. Are there any genres? You said fantasy is not one that you write in. Is there any fantasy in any genre that you? This is like a negative question. I don't even know why I'm going there, but just curious. Is there a genre like you don't like, or that you wouldn't ever even read necessarily?
No. I mean, if you look at my shelf, I have everything. I have romance, erotica, fantasy, horror, thriller. I read anything under the sun, to be honest with you. So they all have something that's worth taking the time. There's some that I gravitate towards more often, and it's pretty much anything with our logo on it. You get the idea that I personally like the darker paranormal books, but I think they're all worthy.
Well, it definitely makes sense. And it has an impact. I think the more you read, probably the more variety you have, and it affects your style of writing too. But this was definitely a really good thrill ride. I keep saying that because it's what it seems like to me. It literally is like taking a thrill ride at the amusement park, and where it takes you. And I can easily see this as a movie. It just has such visual appeal, like that would, like you do that. But I want to say something else that makes it unique. What the most unique thing about this particular thriller is probably your choice of main character. And I'd like for you to talk about that, because it isn't common at all, as you mentioned in your introduction, to have a character with a challenge like MS. And yet Terry, the main character of this novel, definitely has that. Could you talk a little bit about that and why you made that choice?
Well, as much as I said that Anna is responsible for keeping our company afloat, and she very much is, she is also the inspiration behind the first book I ever finished. Fifth novel I ever wrote, the first one I ever saw all the way to the end. And it's really in a style that I know she reads a lot. She reads a lot of true crime, a lot of mysteries, a lot of thrillers, things of that nature. And none of those books had a main character that was like her. Anna has MS, and you can see from the t-shirt, the Fear Not t-shirt, that she is. She's a very brave person, and she's a very strong person. And I don't think that those two things, having a chronic illness and being strong or being capable, are seen together nearly often enough. I didn't see any characters in the books that I read or that she reads that take somebody who already struggles. Like, just getting out of bed in the morning is it can take all your energy. Like, just having the will to go on some days is it. And put them in a situation where they have to truly show what they are capable of. I hadn't seen it, and I think it was way overdue. And so I was really excited to give her a character that was like herself, that she could root for, and see that those things don't matter, that it doesn't strip away who you really are, that the spirit is what counts. And I think Terry's very capable, and she had many barriers, but they didn't stop her from doing what she had to do, because she knew what she had to get done, and she found a way. And I just think that it was time to see something like that. And I'd like to see a lot more of it, to be honest.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, it really does come through. So now, Anna, I have a question for you. First of all, I want to say, because I don't want you to strictly be the person who is only going to be defined by the challenge of having MS, because that's the last thing that anybody wants, is to be defined by that. But because of the uniqueness of this book, that definitely brings some special light to that. So the question I wanted to ask, start off with, almost left, but he's back. So he's sitting right here, so he can't like openly trash the book. But I do have a question for you that I wondered. All kidding aside, how successful was he in depicting what it's like for a person who does deal with MS, as you do? How successful was he in getting that across, those challenges?
I think he did really well. It's something that, unless you're in that person's shoes, then a lot of times you just don't understand. But it's a little easier to describe like the physical challenges and the issues that go on, because those are easy. Those are black and white, and those are some pretty simple things to convey. But the mental part of it is something that changes so much. I can't even keep up with it. That's something that's harder to explain. But I think Jason did a really good job, and especially because he's been in this and seeing what it's like for years now. And so he's becoming a veteran and how it looks.
Yeah, that's true. I wondered what it would be like, or what it was like when he was in the process of writing this book. Did he like bug you to death, like with questions like, well, what would it be like? I mean, would the character really be like, or hypothetically, if you were just hypothetically to find yourself out on a dock in the middle of a lake and you get pursued by a man with a wolfhound? I mean, no. You know what I'm getting at, though. Was it crazy time? Did he ask you tons and tons of questions?
Yeah, that's exactly how it was. But the funny thing is, I had no idea why.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I didn't know this book existed until it was almost ready to be published. And it started coming together after quite a while of getting the questions of, what if you had to get down a set of steps as fast as you could, or what would you feel like if you walked really fast for 100 yards? And eventually I'm like, what the hell is going on? I was like, why are you asking these things?
Yeah.
And he's like, I just need to know. It's just some research. And at the very, very end, he sent me a chapter, and he's like, read this over. And it started from there. Every few days I'd get another chapter. And I'm like, holy shit. I didn't know it existed. He was really good at, that's just kind of how artists are. And I don't like people looking at my artwork while I'm in the middle of it and whatnot. And Jason doesn't tell me anything about what he's writing until the very end. So it was a really cool moment as I started realizing what was going on.
That's really cool. I didn't realize it. I kind of felt like you might have known more as you were going along, but that's really fascinating. I was wondering that when you did read it, what your reaction was like in terms of like how realistic it is. And let's face it, thrillers have got to be beyond the normal of what we'd expect. I mean, if you're going to go to a thriller movie, for example, and you start picking it apart, like if you're going to go see Die Hard, you start going, well, that could never happen. You went to the wrong movie. I mean, that's where that is. But when you were reading this, I mean, there has to be an element of believability. Did you read it, and was your first reaction more like, well, that's pretty cool, but that could never happen? Or was it more like, yeah, Terry is kicking ass and taking names? And so that kind of like, what was your reaction of reading that and that character?
Yeah, there were so many times that I would read things and it made me feel bad, because I always tell Jason he's not listening to me. like any wife, you never think people are listening.
Yeah.
Sorry, what?
And there were a few points in there, and some, like when she would get frustrated, or some of her jokes, and it was things that I normally just dismiss and don't think anyone pays attention. And it really hit home. I'm like, holy cow, you really do catch a lot of things, even though I'm trying to hide how I feel most of the time, because I don't want to complain all the time, because it would be very easy to, because something always hurts. Something is always wrong. But sometimes, well, apparently Jason reads right through it most of the time. So it was very believable. And there were a lot of things that I was like, she's just like me. That's so cool.
Well, that is neat. I'm glad that that came across and as a character that you could relate to, and that you saw that. And it's got to be good feeling, Jason, to hear that. That
Oh yeah.
it's got to be good to be able to hear from Anna that it did come through well, and that that the character was real, and that she also appreciates how much it was her, and that came across, because that was a huge part of this book, I'm sure. But you don't have to know a lot about MS to appreciate what this character goes through, and to appreciate that in the book. It still makes for a really, really excellent story. But Terry's interesting on a number of levels. And first of all, before I get into a lot of that, and Elaine, we haven't given you a chance to say much, so you have to feel free to jump right in. You know how these books are. You know how I am about stuff, so you about have to jump in. But I wanted to ask both Jason and Anna this question about, I mean, it's a thriller, it's for entertainment, it's an adventure ride, it's all those things. But Terry's an interesting person because of the challenge that she has. She, and this is right up front in the beginning of the book, so it's not much of a spoiler at all, the premise of the book. She entertains herself, since she is kind of limited as to what she can do, to watching on her computer, hacking into people's security systems, and she can kind of just entertain herself with things that are going on. Obviously, that's illegal. She also, and this is a real interesting statement, supplements her income by selling some of her own prescription drugs, and then to kind of make up the difference, or she can self-medicate by smoking marijuana. Those are really interesting characteristics. Now, plot-wise, from Jason's point of view, that has to work, because that's going to make it so that when there's a big, terrible issue for her that she witnesses, she can't just go to the police. I mean, again, that's a premise to the book. That's right off the bat. But was there, whether it was intentional or not, is there an indirect statement about our health system and about our laws and about what they do for or don't do for a lot of people in our country? So start off with that, with like what its purpose was, and I want Anna's take on it too.
I don't think it was that indirect. I know I was saying outright that the situation that we have with healthcare in our country is absolute bullshit. And that I've seen this, and it's the reason I wrote about it the way I did. I've seen people who have to make the choice between taking their pills or sharing them for money, or that was a big thing, or having to risk illegal things like finding marijuana online if you're in a state that doesn't have it legalized yet, or bartering the medication that you need off somebody else, because our healthcare system will not fucking cut it when it comes to that. It's a shame. It's pathetic. And I don't know, maybe I was a little too light-handed with the criticism about that. But
no, not at all. I think the reason I say indirect is that you showed us through drama, through the dramatization of what it was, rather than getting on a soapbox and preaching about it. And a lot of times people do have criticisms of authors for putting their political agenda into their books, as it were. It doesn't feel like that, although the case is made. The case is made clearly. Is there a fine line about doing that, or was that in your mind at all, or you just said, to hell with it, I don't care, this is what's getting said?
I think there is. There's a very popular author who has recently become extremely political, and as such, I have completely stopped reading their books entirely. And this is a shame, because it's an author I've read for over 2 decades. I think it's fine to put politics into a book if it is within the realm of the character that you're writing about. And I feel like the things that Terry does are 100% pure to her character. And that's the reason I liked her, is because she became an example of what was wrong and what needs to change without shoving it down your throat. Nobody needs to, you don't have to shoehorn it in there. I think it plays true to her personality and the way that she would have reacted to the situation that we all find ourselves in. And because of that, it belongs there. If any of the other characters had come out with that, or, if it was, if it was just completely out of character, then that's not serving the story, and the story comes first, in my opinion. But yeah, I think that's what characters are for. They're to give us an opportunity to see the world from somebody else's point of view. So it would have been a disservice to her character and to Anna, who she was based on, not to have her be as honest as she could be and as real as she could be. So I'm glad she came out like that.
And Anna, anything to Terry as a character, how that comes across, but also how you feel. I don't want to pry into your life, but if you did identify with her in that regard, and if you feel like, do you feel like there's a lot that this country could do or is not doing for folks who have challenges like yours?
Yeah, absolutely. And it is a touchy situation, like you said. And when it comes to medications, I can only go by what I've experienced, and it's on both sides of the spectrum. I've been in the case to where something that costs $4,000 for a month's supply, and I had insurance, and I was able to get it for $5 at CVS. And I've also been on the other side of it to where there was no way that I could afford it.
Right.
And when it's something that helps improve your life so much, such as the one I'm thinking about right now, was it helps speed up the nervous reactions, and you can walk better. So what would anyone else do for that if you can't go and get it for $5 because you don't have insurance? There's a lot of things that you would do, and it would surprise yourself when you're in that situation. But it was funny when the book came out. My mother wanted to read it, of course, because Jason wrote it. And the first thing I told her, I'm like, just skip over any cuss words. There's some in there. And I've never sold my medicine online. I was like, so you don't have to worry about that. But the only reason I haven't, I wish I could. I wish I could help people that need it. And when medications don't work out for me and I have a big supply of them, but I'm terrified of giving them or selling them to someone else because there's such repercussions of that. And that's the only reason I haven't, to be honest. I agree with it, and I know why people do it. And then as far as the aspect of the character using marijuana, anybody that knows me knows that I'm very pro marijuana, like Willie Nelson level pro marijuana. It's a plant. And I think everyone should be able to partake in it. But when it comes to people and medical issues and people that have severe problems, we don't even have enough time for me to speak my mind on that. I think anyone that needs it should have it because it works wonders. It doesn't cure anything. It doesn't take things away, but it helps so much. It helps you deal with chronic illnesses and pain and PTSD and anxiety issues and
pretty much
it's
anything,
endless.
really.
A world of things that I'm sure. And unfortunately, it seems like often the people who are in charge making the decisions, until it affects them personally, they don't understand and don't seem to have the sympathy, and they rely on some other false sense of morality rather than the real morality about compassion and looking at what would be important to people. So I'll leave that at that and try not to get too much into it either. But the book, very skillfully, in my opinion, makes us think about those things, as you said, Jason, without shoving it down somebody's throat. And that's a sign of another good book. Now, it didn't have to have that, but it really is a neat thing. And so to move off of that into another area of illicit activity that I found fascinating was this whole idea of kind of being a peeping Tom on a security system, which is an interesting thing. And I wondered, you've got some tech background. How easy or how likely and feasible is it that somebody could do what Terry was doing there?
All right. Let me say this in no uncertain terms. I could do that right now in less than 5 minutes.
Wow.
To anybody
That
in
has
the world. It is not hard. So your webcam, no matter how much you want to think it's secure, it is not. In fact, 90% of the people, I think I was doing the research for it, and it said 70-something% of people who get home security systems never change the password that comes out of the box. That's just not smart. Okay, so it's really not difficult. I got the idea for the book because some Russian hackers back about 2006, 2007, you can look it up. Don't worry about putting their pants on, Roger. Everybody's already seen it.
That's funny. That's great.
About 06, 07, a Russian hacker got about 200 webcams from the US, hacked them and put them on a live channel, but didn't tell anybody about it for a year. Just let them play live on this channel. So people in their homes who had ADT or whoever were being spied on. And then after a year, they released the footage to the FBI to let them know that it was that easy and that no one had ever caught them.
Wow.
So that's where the original seed for this whole story came from. But it is very, very easy to do. And Terry's a little bit smarter than I am, but she did manage to narrow the scope down to her local area, which you can do through IP address filtering and shit like that. But I mean, it's not as easy as picking a specific person and saying I'm going to spy on that person, but it can be. Once you have a little bit of information on a target, you can track them down pretty easily. And if you can get an IP address off them, it's over with.
Wow. That's scary. That's pretty scary. But it made for a good plot. I'll tell you that. That did really work well with this book. The whole idea is really kind of cool. And I wanted to ask this question, and I hope it comes across right because it has the potential, I guess, to be weird. And I'll start it by kind of giving it from myself. I wrote the story, The 13th Day of Christmas. It's a novella. And people, when they do read it, sometimes people come to me and they go, oh, that's kind of like The Dome, Stephen King's book, The Dome. And I go, yeah, a little bit. But, there's one basic thing that's kind of similar, but the rest of the story is a lot different. Well, there is a similarity in Watcher with Rear Window, the Alfred Hitchcock movie, but just about the same sort of superficial thing. There's a structure there, something happens, then the stories are different and the characters are very different. But it made me think about Alfred Hitchcock, even though he didn't write the stories, he was an excellent director. Was there anything about Hitchcock that inspires you, or do you think it might have influenced you? And do you have any favorite Hitchcock movies?
Yes. Yes to all of the above.
All of the above.
I think every modern storyteller is influenced by Hitchcock, whether you like it or not, because he's one of the best. And his range cannot be overstated. What an effect he had. I even had his magazines. He had an Alfred Hitchcock magazine, which is just this little like Reader's Digest style floppy thing when I was growing up. And I had thought I knew about him. Oddly enough, Rear Window had completely escaped my attention until after Watcher came out. Well, it was right before it came out because I let somebody read an advanced copy and they said, oh, you wrote a modern Rear Window. And I cussed at them for a few minutes. And
that reaction I had. Okay.
But I think the trail is, I was actually loosely inspired by the movie Disturbia with Shia LaBeouf. And it was about a kid who was on lockdown. He had house arrest and he was watching his neighbor, and his neighbor was a criminal. And that movie was inspired by Rear Window. So to say that it didn't have an influence is impossible. I think it did indirectly. And the answer that I give to most people when they ask about that is there's a lot worse things to be compared to than Alfred Hitchcock. So I'll take it.
Yeah.
Any day of the week.
Nothing is in a vacuum anyway. I mean,
No.
So, but your treatment and well, just the basic premise. That's, I mean, the very kernel of that premise is all that actually overlaps, and beyond that, it's another story, and it's really interesting. I mean, what is it that they've said that there's really only 7 basic plots anyway, and then from there we spin off and do variations. So, but I am glad to hear. I was curious about the Hitchcock, just Hitchcock influence and the Hitchcock suspense.
He wrote some amazing. He wrote and directed. Anything he was involved with was awesome. So
yeah, I can't vouch for what kind of person he was, but he made some damn good movies.
Right.
So that's all. And the same thing's true about almost any kind of writer. There was something else too about. Well, I was going to just mention that. I guess I kind of already have when we were talking about Terry and how believable she was. And I don't know that it's really important to get to that, because every action movie is going to be an exaggeration of it. But stress is a huge thing with MS. It's a huge thing with everyone. But Terry in that book has such mountains of stress, both physically and emotional. And you were mentioning what it's like mentally. What was it like? I mean, if you don't mind, just that element of stress in reading the book. Did you think about that at all, Anna, when you were reading it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it caused me stress reading it. Getting to the end of each chapter drove me crazy.
Yeah.
And there was a lot that I could understand of, like, her at the end of the day and trying to go to sleep and not being able to, and worried about medications and whatnot. That it was very believable. That's how MS works.
Yeah, but a lot of people probably don't understand that level of what stress. I mean, stress does things to everybody, but when you have MS, it's like this big magnifying glass that just makes everything, I don't know, 100 times worse, and it can affect you in a lot of ways. And I thought the book actually brought that home again too. I mean, a lot of people, if they read the book, in addition to a good story, they'll learn a lot, I think, about what MS is like. And maybe we get more attention to that as a ailment, because there's still so many. You could speak hours on this, I'm sure, but so many treatments, so many cocktails that we're trying to discover, and how it works with different people in terms of medicating and trying to do things. So we still have a long way to go in treatment of that. But the book at least does show that kind of element about what stress does. Maybe to all of us, but certainly to a character with that kind of a challenge. But you mentioned something else about pacing, and so I want to switch into my writer's hat for a minute and ask a question about the mechanics of writing for Jason. Pacing is always important in a book, but in a thriller like this, it's really important. And I was very curious if you could tell us a little bit about the process by which you did pace and plan your book. It seems to me in this one that you'd have to be a planner and not a pantser, because you had to kind of structure the thing chapter by chapter.
Well, I take planning to a level that I don't think most people have ever experienced before. By the time I sit down and actually write the book, all I'm doing is adding dialogue. So I've written a couple novels that I've written out, including my second one, Ghost Story. It was written as I use what's called snowflake method. So I write a sentence, and then I write 4 sentences, and then I write 4 paragraphs, and then I write like 4 pages, and until I have the chapters completely laid out the way I want them. But I used a couple tricks with Watcher that I haven't used again, but I want to. One of them is the scene and sequel method, which is that every chapter is either a scene or a sequel. So every chapter is either moving the action forward or it's responding to the last chapter. And in Watcher, I did that pretty reliably, back and forth. So that allowed me to end on a cliffhanger on just about every chapter, and then not give you the payoff immediately on the page turn. I think that made it read a lot quicker.
Mm-hmm.
So you can Google that. There's a whole theory behind how that works and units, and all this comes from I can't remember the dude's name, but he wrote. If you Google Snowflake method, the guy who wrote that, this is all stuff that he talks about. You can read it on his website or in any of his books. How to handle the pacing on that. And the other thing I did was, if you look at the chapters, I stuck to a very strict page count and got shorter as the book went on.
Mm-hmm.
So from a technical perspective, then that did a lot for, I think, for the pacing and for getting you to the point and kind of raising the pulse a little bit. I hope it was effective.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
Mm-hmm.
those are my favorite things to do to keep a book moving.
Well, that's cool. That is good to know. And that pacing was definitely there, and it did pick it up, and you definitely build to a very anxious was the word that came to mind first, but I don't really mean that. But I mean, it was definitely a frantic ending. Things build up. Wow. Okay. So you got a lot going on there, and I'm not going to give anything away about that. Characters are another really, really important thing. And I want to ask you from, again, a writer's perspective about that. Do you plan out, since you plan your chapters and pacing so specifically, I guess you probably equally plan your characters. I wondered if they were all laid out or if some characters get born along the way, so to speak. How did you develop?
First thing, let me thank Roger for that's a wonderful compliment. So thank you, Roger Gorex, for he's always been a big supporter and a good fan of the company. So I'm certainly glad that people like that are enjoying this book. The characters, I didn't have all of them. I had most of them. I didn't have the detective. The end of the book did change. Two or three chapters towards the end of the book completely changed. I decided to rip a scene out, and so it necessitated the invention of a new set of characters. So the cops that she meets, the one at the end in the crap, I'm not sure if that's the scene I took out. With the cops that she meets. Then the detective Pastore, those were invented towards the end, but I knew who the villain was almost immediately. I just had I had a solid beat on him, and I knew obviously who Terry was going to be, and I had a strong feeling of who Thomas was going to turn out to be, and he rounded out pretty much into what I expected as the writing, the initial draft began. Angela's character, I realized, wasn't formed fully, so I thought it was appropriate that towards the end they have their B&E session, which I won't go too much into. It's a little bit of a spoiler, but I had an opportunity to really flesh her out and show who she was prior to the story. So I enjoyed it. I enjoyed a chance to explore her a little bit more. But for the most part, I had the cast ready when the book started. Okay.
That's interesting to note. That I do wonder about that. And Elaine, you're working on a novel. Do you have all? I know you. I don't think we can any of us say safely that we have all of our characters already out there. But how much are you a planner or a pants, fly by the seat of your pants kind of writer?
I'm actually, so since it's my first one, I had no idea which one I was, but it turns out that I'm a really good mix of both, which probably maddens people. All of my characters are completely fleshed out, which has been kind of annoying to me. I'm annoying myself. I actually hadn't touched my project since February until yesterday.
Oh wow!
Because there was a piece of it that kind of got tangled up, and I think it's actually been so long. I'm not really sure why I stopped, but I think it was because I got frustrated trying to pick it apart and untangle it. But mine actually, the the way I'm attacking it for the most part is a little bit opposite from what Jason's been doing. So instead of him having one sentence and then building on that and going like chapter by chapter that way, mine actually started with dialogue and then has built from there. It actually, the premise for my story was the result of not a VSS prompt, a little love story prompt from Twitter.
Oh, okay.
And normally I will only post one piece, and I posted one, and then I was like, oh, wouldn't it be really cool if I did another kind of like an opposite one to go with it? And I did, and then that just sort of, then the VSS prompt for that day just dovetailed like crazy. So then I added that to it, and then the next day, the next prompt totally just added on to the story, and it went on for like 2 weeks. And I was like, well, okay, this is just officially going to become a novel. And at first I was joking, but then everybody was like, no, seriously, you have to write the whole thing. And I was like, no. And they're like, yes. So it's
There
a whole thing now.
Well, that's interesting. So it's going to evolve, even though you say a lot of the characters are fleshed out. But it is interesting that we get these characters and we have a feeling for them. Speaking of characters,
You know, he makes an appearance in every single video.
he absolutely does. He's realized it was his time. But I mean, but certainly you get an immediate feeling about these characters, and they're really strong feelings. And I wondered, Jason, everybody needs a friend like Thomas, it seems like. And I wondered what there was some inspiration for Thomas for you.
Well,
he knows
it's weird.
Thomas very well. I'm not sure. Okay.
He was very strongly inspired by a friend of ours that lives nearby. In fact, Angela's house in the book is his house where he lives at. So it was perfectly placed, and I was like, "This, I know the floor plan well enough to have a crime scene if I need to." And his character, it just worked.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd say he's a good 60 to 70% based on somebody I actually know.
Okay.
Was a friend of Anna's for God. How long have you been friends? 10 years or more, at least, right?
20
years. So the chemistry was there. What's that?
So just a little shy.
Yeah. 10, 20, somewhere in there. Well, Anna, did your friend, when he read the book, I assume he's Red Watcher by now?
Yeah, he read it.
Did he think, oh, there's a bit of me in that book? Did he recognize that, or did you just have to tell him after the fact?
Yeah, it was pretty obvious. There was a lot of like our inside jokes that we banter back and forth with, like we have over the years, that are thrown in there.
Yeah.
So there's no doubt he would have known really quick.
Oh, okay.
And I think even just reading the back of the book before he even started, he started calling me Terry on messages and text messages. So
yeah, I can see that happening for you.
yeah.
Well, they are.
He actually,
and they do come across well. And this relationship that Terry has with Thomas is a really neat one to have. From again, another writing kind of question, Jason, when you're mapping out or you're planning out your characters, one thing, here we are, we're a pretty white group here, sitting here. Do you plan for diversity when you're creating a cast of characters, and do you feel like that makes it artificial, or do you, to deliberately think about things, or does it just kind of come naturally if there are characters of different, whether they're gender identification, whether it's their race or whatever? How does that come across, or does it come across deliberately in your planning?
Well, I'm going to do what most people won't do, and I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to say that, oh, I don't see color. What are you talking about? No. These characters made themselves known on who they were from the beginning. But when I started planning the book, especially because it was important that this was one that features a disabled character, And this is one that speaks to inclusion. I had it in my mind, am I being inclusive here without pandering? Because I don't have any, there's no need for that in this world. Do these characters that I've imagined, are they realistically diverse? Because the world actually is diverse. Having a book full of nothing but white people actually would have been unrealistic, in my opinion, because that's just not how it is. So I thought about it, and I actually struggled a little with not having two of the characters. Two of the characters are black. One's Latin, Hispanic, you know. So I stop. So I struggled a lot with that, on whether it would be viewed the wrong way. It's the same with Ghost Story, because Ghost Story has a mixed cast as well, a mixed couple, and so does this. And I swear I'm not doing that on purpose. It's just the way that I feel like these characters represent and the way they should be. So I was like, well, I'm not going to back down on having a black best friend who may be a love interest, because people are going to view it the wrong way, because they may think it was for to be PC or whatever, or they may not like it. Either one of those viewpoints I don't really care about. So I felt like that was the right ethnicity for the character I had in mind, and I was pleased that it did present a diverse cast for the book. So that was the reason I decided to keep it that way.
Well, that's cool. And it works well in both stories also, very naturally, but that it doesn't seem forced. In fact, to be honest, I think it'd be very easy to read the book and not even think about race, and that's the way it really ought to be. Not that we don't see color, because race is important. It's a part of our identity, and it should be recognized and celebrated. But if it's artificial, then it becomes weird. And there is a question or a challenge sometimes for writers. It's probably well, I've just seen it across the board when people are commenting on things like whether or not, if you're white, can you write a black character? If you're, if you're straight, can you write a gay character, and all that sort of thing. This comes across naturally because that's the way that the story unfolds, and it's realistic. That's what you're striving for. And then it doesn't become generally the point of the story, and it just isn't that. It's not affecting the story, and I think you achieved that. I was just curious as to how much thought had to go into it ahead of time, and it sounds like it was just more organic. That it just kind of happened. You have friends like that, and they in real life, and they also represent themselves to some degree as an influence in your stories, and that's the way life works. And so, writing, even fiction, is a reflection of our lives. So, anyway, success in my opinion about how you did that. But I was curious about how you did go about it. I also mentioned, for people like me who happen to share the same town that you're living in, this was a special thrill to read a book where you recognize the places that are mentioned in the book. And I wondered, there were some things that were so cool. I mean, about downtown Asheville. I think I Googled it and found that I don't think there's actually a Biltmore Shores closed gated community, but it seems so believable. I had to look it up to see if it might be there. And I wondered how much it came across, all of it so real, and so many things that were very physical that had to be physically described, from Terry's apartment to downtown Asheville and walking around places to other people's homes that are very important in the story. You mentioned that there's one place that actually is your friend who was the inspiration for Thomas, his house is Angela's house. Did you sit down physically, like if you were downtown, did you actually kind of get a firm idea of how things worked? And especially, I've asked this without giving away any scenes, there's an important scene in a big house in this gated community, and you have to have a really firm idea of the outside and the inside of what this house is like. Were you looking at a house when you wrote that scene, or did you have to create it and draw it out on paper, or what was your?
I'll tell you how bad I am about this, how meticulous of a plotter I am. The hotel that's in the book, I not only went to the hotel to make sure I had the floor plan accurate, I actually ran up and down the stairs to make sure that would be 100% believable. I went up both sides, both stairwells. I went to the floor where their room is. I saw it myself. and actually plotted out every one of their actions in that building to make sure that it would fit, even where the sauna is. And if you could see the front desk when you come out of the stairwell, if every little detail is matched.
Oh, that's
I have to interrupt.
Yes.
Because I'm so sad right at this moment, because up until just before you started talking, my husband was in the room because he's working on his own computer doing something else, and he just left to go take our son to work. I've been trying to convince him that we have to take a road trip to Georgia because that's where my story is going to be set. I'm like, I have to go visit it because I've done the same thing. Google Maps will only take me so far. Like, I know exactly where, because she works in a bar, right? So I know the plot of land where it's going to be situated, and I know the apartment that she's going to be living in, but I need to drive it. I'm also trying to convince him to buy me the silver Jeep that she's going to be driving, because I need to know whether or not it handles in snow. I need to know if it handles in mud. I need to know these things. Does the sound system, is it good? Can I blare music or not? I need to know these things for research. So I'm sad because that could have just been proof that doing those things makes for an excellent story.
So what you need to do is catch the replay of this on our YouTube channel at 45 minutes
and play
and be
it
like, watch.
Gotta watch this
before I go on my
even in my second novel, in Ghost Story, every location in that book I've been to. So everything, and most of those locations are tamed down versions of things that actually happened. But to stick with this one, there is no Biltmore Shores, but that's because it's a park in Asheville across from the energy plant. And Ann and I actually went there, and I had a scene completely laid out. And we went, and I made sure I actually I took a Google Maps image, and I drew out the plots of land for how many houses would fit if they had just obscenely huge yards, what the types of trees along the shoreline were, so that would be accurate. So everything was right. And then I stuck my hand in the water, and I realized it's not cold. That the water around the energy plant is very, very warm. So I had to completely rewrite that.
Yeah. They don't allow swimming.
What?
They do not allow swimming in it, or at least they didn't used to, because of the plant that's there. Although the plant may be gone, the smokestacks may have been demolished already by now. I'm not sure, but it's on there's a schedule for that whole thing to go down, which is interesting because then it's not going to be there forever. Which is kind of, I don't think it could be down yet, but it's in the works. Read that, I can't remember how long ago, but that's going to be an interesting thing. But I know that park well. In the last years of mentoring in the public school system, I take my lunch break there. I drive in there because it's a very nice, peaceful place to be in. But for years we would go there, and I had a friend that even worked there as a ranger. He worked with the park ranger service, and they run it. And there are paddle boats and that kind of thing, but you're not supposed to swim in it. You can in it.
You can boat.
Yes, but in a boat.
So,
but it would
in the book,
I have to tell, and I don't know if Anna had this kind of thought or not, but one of the things that it was very realistic. It's not a flaw of the book. It's just something that made my skin crawl and made me very uncomfortable for a very long time. And again, I don't think this is a spoiler, but Terry gets soaking wet from that lake. And I think it's at least a day and a half, if not 2 days, before she can take a shower and get out of those clothes. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I know that lake. If I had gotten wet, I don't think I could have made it 2 hours without doing that. And it just, that just bugged me to death. And it added to the whole feel of like, oh my God, this is really, and again, it was stress. It was more stress to feel that way for that long. So that was a deliberate thing too, I guess, or it's just the way the plot unfolded that she wasn't going to get out of those wet clothes.
Yeah, that was the thing to keep up with. Is that and I was accused of it in both of my novels, that I have people have to take bathroom breaks, and I have people remember that you have to eat, you have to shower. Like, these are daily things for most people that need to be, when they're not in a narrative. Like if I'm watching like space stuff, I'm like, man, you guys have been running from aliens for about a week. You must smell terrible.
Right.
And nobody mentions that. Like,
Where
when did you
rashes?
So stuff like that matters. And I did keep a journal of how long it had been since she had changed clothes and what she would have been wearing that whole time. For it would have been more difficult if you weren't wearing the right kind of shoes to go breaking into a house, things like that. But yeah, I thought it just a little gross out factor on there because it is nasty in that lake. So I'm sure she smelled like dead fish and whatever else.
It definitely worked. It definitely was on my nerves for sure. There's another little writing thing, and I hope that we have, if people are watching, it's often from a writer's perspective, in addition to just a damn good book. But one of the little tiny things that I think about that bugs the hell out of me when I'm writing are dialogue tags. And how to use them to help people keep straight who's talking when you've got a conversation that's taking place and there's short things that are being said. And it seemed to me that you kind of followed the Ernest Hemingway school of thought as like, don't even have them if you can, and most of us would prefer to not have any dialogue tags, I imagine. Anything that says he said, she said, those little things. And I've heard different theories about that. I've heard don't have them at all. I've heard if you have them, you need to use only the word said. You can't even say shouted, whispered, mumbled, all those kinds of use those words. What do you have any kind of advice or what kind of things you follow when it comes to using those? Because there actually are a pain. I will say this, it can be a problem if you don't have any, because as a reader, I have had to stop sometimes and go back and go through dialogue to
alternate sentences.
Talking and who said that. And if you have to do that, it's kind of a problem because it stops the whole action of the book. So what are your thoughts about those stupid little dialogue tags?
It's a blend. First off, I am, as I am also anti-Oxford comma. Sorry, I know you're a reformed teacher.
Yeah.
I am anti-dialogue tag. I used them in Ghost Story at the urging of my editor, and I feel like it worked okay for that story, but I don't like them. I am heavily influenced. That's what?
That was very grudgingly.
Yeah. Well, she also threw in a bunch of Oxford commas, and I'm not mad. The story reads well. She did an amazing job of getting that put together. So that shouldn't be taken as a slight. It's just a style preference.
Sure.
I am heavily influenced by Michael Crichton. I think he was one of the best writers of our generation, and he was very spare. So he said what he had. He was just like Richard Matheson, who managed to tell one of the best stories I've ever read in 17 pages. So they were both really good at getting a point across using the very simplest of language. And I feel like if your characters are fully fleshed out, you'll know who's talking. Because you'll say that could only have been one character when you hear those lines. And I don't feel usually, and that sometimes yes, sometimes no. I mean, there's exceptions to everything, but more often than not, I feel like the dialogue carries itself, and the tags are more of a distraction. So I try to lose them whenever possible to keep enough that you're clear on who's talking. But if they're not necessary, then just drop them. So that definitely was what I was trying to do there. And I tried to alternate sentences so that it was clear and not have too long a block of dialogue where you could get lost. So I think like 3 or 4 sentences of dialogue, and then you need something. Nobody just stands there and speaks. You're always doing something. I got lost in my answer to that question, but I hope that answered your question.
No, that's a good one, though. I appreciate it, because that's what I felt was the case. But I do wonder, you do hear different schools of thought on that. Because I have read that people said like, oh, actually readers, it becomes invisible to them. They just skim over it, but it does give them maybe a subconscious tag. I hate them, but I use them. But I try to use them sparingly, but they really are an issue. But again, I will point out, I know I'm repeating myself, but there have been times when I had to go back in dialogue to go, wait a minute, who's talking? Because the conversation wasn't necessarily by their personality. It was just what information was being relayed. could have been either one, and I had to go, wait a minute, well, who did say that? And so it's a trick. It's a hard thing to know as an author what you need to do there. I do also want to be sure to ask. I mentioned about Thomas as a character. I don't know if there are any other characters. He was really strong. I mean, you've got Terry and you've got Thomas, and they're your really strongest characters in the book. Without giving anything away, that's why I'm kind of stumbling about this. Were there other people or other characters in the book that were really vivid to you? You mentioned you knew who your villain was right away, and I know you don't want to necessarily give anything about it that would spoil it for the reader, but and when you have a villain, to have some inspiration is kind of a tricky thing to talk about too. But he did seem vivid. Was that a total creation? Did you have things in mind, or were there other characters that you felt like were really vivid in your own mind?
You kind of broke up on me. What was that question?
What characters, if any, were especially strong to you besides Thomas and Terry?
Roman.
Yeah. I was wondering about the villain.
He's made up. So he's not based on anybody I know specifically. He's actually based on 3 different characters who were in popular fiction. One of them being Uncle Phil from The Fresh Prince. One of them being Michael Clark Duncan, because the way he handled the Green Mile was just astounding. And Roger's going to have to help me with the third. He always tells me who it is, and I even met the guy. He's a more of a 80s actor. I think he was in They Live, maybe. But I always get his name wrong. So it was 3 actors that I had seen, and I really enjoyed their characters, and I thought they blended well.
Yeah.
So that's how I came up with him. Angela didn't have a basis in real life at all. She's just completely made up. So yeah, and actually, Pastore is inspired by Agatha Christie, Hercule Poirot.
Mm-hmm.
So I had been reading a whole lot of Keith David. Thank you.
There you go.
Keith David is the actor, and he's amazing. His attitude is very strong in Roman. But I've been reading a lot of Agatha Christie right before I wrote this book, so I think that's how Poirot ended up. I had to have a French-sounding detective working on this case. It just wouldn't work any other way.
Oh, that's cool. That's funny. Well, neat. Well, there are tons of things to talk about, but they also might be spoilers, and I don't want to go there. But I did want to ask about where you're going next and whether we might see these characters again. And I'm trying to leave that wide open without having to say too much. But I just wondered if you liked them. When you like characters a whole lot, it seems like you might be tempted to bring them back and do something with them. Do you like that genre? Did you like the thriller? Do you want to go down that road again?
I love it. I love writing mysteries. I love writing thrillers. I have 3 mystery thriller titles in my folder, and one of them is a sequel.
Okay.
So I very much enjoyed these characters. When I finished the book, everybody asked me if I was going to write a second one, and I said I have no idea. I don't see how I could.
You said no.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't see how I could possibly write this again, because it wrapped up really well, and without giving it away, I feel like it kind of ended a lot of possibilities for certain things happening. But I left enough doors open, and I've been thinking about it for a while, and I really do like them. So it would be fun to hang out with those guys again.
Yeah. It seems like time has to pass.
Yeah, you gotta let that sit for a while. I mean, that novel was 2 or 3 years of. I actually wrote it. The reason I wrote that particular story, I wanted to do the character, and it was 2 things that had been conflicting for a while. I had the story I wanted to write about somebody who watches webcams, but I was going to write it from the villain's perspective.
Oh yeah.
So it was a villain watching webcams and how he used that to spy on his victims and get their routines down and stuff like that. And I pitched that to a contest with the highest paid author in the world that doesn't write his own books. And I didn't win. I didn't win the contest. And I mean, I don't know why. I took it personally. I really did. I was like, well, screw you. It's still a really good story. But then it was when I was starting to pay a lot of attention to what Anna was reading, and that there were no characters for her, and that I was like, this needs to change. So I was like, well, if we make an anti-hero who has these disabilities, but also slides into that spot where she just happens to be in the wrong place at the wrong time kind of situation, that story seemed a lot more compelling to me, and it just took off.
Yeah.
So so that's why I wrote that. And so it took several years to get to that progression. So to have these characters have a story worth telling again, it'll take them a while to bring it together. Plus, I got to write it. And I mean, who writes anymore?
7 other books or 6 other books that are sitting there staring at you, waiting to be finished too, right?
That doesn't count short stories.
Yeah. The short story. Yeah. Well, I tell you about short stories. I love them. They may not make people money, but I still love it as an art form.
Well, they really are good.
Where things are going leads me to this question. It's not necessarily writing, but it's about where projects are going. And there's something that I want you and Anna to talk about, and that is that there seems like there's been some interesting developments. Because you've got Gestalt Media, and you also have Witty Kitty Studios, and there's speaking of studios, there's kind of an opportunity that's gotten a little boost, it sounds like, recently, and I wondered if you wanted to mention where you are heading. And I'll put it in this kind of a frame of mind. Where 10 years from now, if things go well, where will Gestalt Media and Witty Kitty Studios be, and what would it look like, and what would life be like?
God, I have no idea. So in the immediate future, anybody who follows, who's on our mailing list, which you should be, and if you're not, go to our website, scroll down to the bottom, put your email in. We'll send you some really cool stuff. Has seen that there's a milk house on the property that's got at least 40, 50 years old, something like. I mean, it hasn't been used in 40 years, so I know it's been around a while. That had just fallen into disrepair, and we saw an opportunity to renovate something that means a lot to the family here, and has a lot of history. And it was a huge part of why we get to live the life that we live today, and why we can take risks like this on a publishing company in a world that increasingly doesn't pay for books. So we're renovating that. So it's 2 stories. The upstairs will be for Gestalt Studios, which is my art studio that I run, and we'll be doing, you and I will be doing audio recordings there, because we're hoping to move into, with Haunted coming out, our first audio book, we're hoping to do more audio releases. And you will also be doing your podcast from there, I believe, at least some of them. Into the Unknown podcast will be recording there. And then the downstairs is going to be Witty Kitty Studios, which I won't say a word about. I'll let Anna talk about it, because she's super talented, and she's done a lot in these last few years to build that into something pretty cool. So
pretty cool. And we can see a little bit behind you, but I wonder, Anna, by any chance, do you happen to have an example of some of your art right there at hand?
I do.
She's wearing one of them.
But talk amongst yourselves. My phone is about to die, and I'm going to go upstairs and join in with Jason.
Oh, okay. All right.
And I'll bring up my latest piece.
All right.
That I've been working on.
Well, we'll get everybody up to speed while you're in the process of doing that, because
anticipation.
I'm having to, by the way,
The sun is chasing you, David. Run.
I know I'm going to disappear like a vampire in a minute. I'm at my natural lighting, but as the sun's going down on the horizon, I hadn't planned for that. So yeah, you're right. The sun's chasing me here. So that's our
awesome.
thing. When I disappear in a poof of smoke, then the show's over. Woody Kitty Studios is the stained glass art and other things too, of art collectibles and whatnot that Anna has worked on. I'm most familiar with seeing some of the stained glass since I happen to be the proud owner of a beautiful piece of stained glass art of the mama bear and her three cubs right now, but she had 2 cubs that Anna made for us, and we are thrilled with and live with every day. Get to watch the light come from stained glass, but the stained glass art is incredible. So the downstairs of the milk house will be a new home for Woody Kitty Studios. Oh, and so you got to see this. For all of us, Gestalt Media, and anybody that likes dark literature, my gosh, that's great. Yeah, bring it on into the camera. Oh, there we go. Look at that. Is that not cool?
That's really cool.
That came out great, Anna.
Thank you.
And it's really on my.
It was so difficult.
A little more pink than it does red, but it is a really neat, beautiful, deep red. And then in when you see a close up, you can see the pattern within the glass is really cool, even of that red glass. I'm really loving that. I think you need to make a bunch of people.
Here she is. See, we really do like each other.
They really are in the same house.
Yeah. And then you're wearing
cool. You, I guess, are still enjoying art, stained glass art. You didn't quit after doing Eileen and her cubs for me, and that was a good thing.
No,
ruin
I would be working on another one for you if the print shop hadn't closed for a little bit.
But you see, that is something that is going to be an ongoing. I mean, obviously, their plans for the studio will just enhance things so that you can make even more art. Look, there's a Greg Lincoln. Thanks. He says it's amazing, and it is amazing. That piece is incredible.
Hey, Greg.
Greg's awesome.
I like asking that question. I used to ask my students that. I would say when they were, in high school, and I had them write their journal things like, "Where in 10 years do you see yourself?" So I kind of wonder that about Gestalt Media and Studios. If everything's great, what's happened in 10 years?
Oh, I'll take this one. So if everything's great, we are and were from the beginning. And that's why we have the name we don't. I didn't choose Gestalt Press or publishing, but we are a media company. And that's what I want to pursue. And that's what we're building towards. We started with novels. I think we'll always stay with the core there, I hope. It's a very low margin business, so we need people to buy our books and review our books. And we'll keep doing the audiobook. So I like podcasting a lot. I think there's a bright future for us there. Hopefully those shows are going far into the future with yours, with Dark Corners, and with Into the Unknown. That's so much fun to do that every week and to have new people on and just have these conversations, kind of like we're having here with these live videos. You can't replace that. And it's just got a very personal feel to it. After that, we're gonna step into graphic novels this year. So including the graphic novel of 13th Day of Christmas, Another Tales of Inside Terror by somebody who is on this chat. Ghost Story has one planned as well, doing the backstory of the character of the ghosts. So whereas Ghost Story is about a guy who sees ghosts, the graphic novel is about how they got there, how they ended up as the recently or not so recently departed. So I'm excited about that. I'd like to continue pursuing that. There's plans down the road for an interactive phone app I'm pretty excited about. I won't tell too much information because there are people who will get it done way faster than I could. But so we're exploring everything right up until there are scripts. There's at least one movie script out at the moment that has been read and is I don't know where that's going to go. Nobody ever does. It's a very unpredictable business, but I don't think we have a ceiling, really. We're just going to keep going until somebody comes over and tells us to stop, or it stops making money. I don't know, whichever.
That's cool. Well, like you say, it's media. It's Gestalt Media. It's got lots of possibilities, and I think as we keep pursuing those, we'll just see what happens. But so I hope that we get to talk, and I think we are. We have some plans. We'll talk about Ghost Story on one of these future book chats.
Probably either the 12th or the 26th. We got to see. We're going to do 2 more of these in May. So one will be on Tuesday the 12th and one on Tuesday the 26th. So we'll see who's available, but we'll probably fit Ghost Story into one of those slots.
Cool. And then we'll have some other authors of our group and see where it goes from there. But it's been fun. This is really fun to find out a little bit more about behind the scenes. I always taught literature and I taught books, about authors with kids, but I never had the chance to talk to the writers. And so it's kind of cool to be able to have that opportunity to go, well, what about this when you're at, of a book you actually read? So I hope other people can, they have the same kind of fun and find that it is fun too. So with that, I'm done. Unless anybody else I want to say, and we'll kind of let you count us out or we'll just say goodbye and see you next time.
Well, did Elaine have any more questions? She's so nice to be here, and I just wanted to give her an opportunity. I think our watchers had what they had to say. So just thank everybody who's read the book and everybody who hasn't yet. Thank you in advance. Watcher is the book that made this all possible. Putting that out and taking that chance was the first step in the Gestalt Media history, whatever that's going to end up being. So it's very, very personal book to me, and I'm very proud of it, and I'm very happy that it exists. So I'm happy people are reading it, and hopefully it makes a difference in people's lives, especially those that live with chronic illness and maybe don't feel like they're good enough, or maybe don't feel like they're capable of doing things. You totally are. You can do a lot more than you think you can. Yeah. I think all of us could. We sell ourselves short. So thanks for reading, and thanks for watching.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, goodbye, everybody. It's been fun.
Bye.
See you next time. Get out of the sun.
All right.